Oh, hiya. Welcome back to Why We Bleep. Why? VCAs! I welcome you back, here for to talk all things of the synth. How have you been? You getting on well? It's been a while since we spoke. It's getting cold in England now. The cold times roll in. Good music making times, these cold times, don't you think? And I've been busy, very busy. What have I done since we last chatted? I went to NAMM, which wasn't very cold at all. That was actually quite warm, and saw all of the wonderful equipment. Perhaps you will have seen, I've popped up in a few videos, namely for Sonic State and for DivKid, sort of assessing all of the cool stuff that came out of NAMM. And I don't know if you need me to reassess that now, but I mean, there's loads of good stuff. I want to sort of reiterate the thing that kind of blew me away with those little 2HP modules, if you ever saw those. Those are little tiny kick drum snare hats. Kick snare hats. And they sound great, and they're really small. In 6HP you could have a complete drum backline, and I thought that was actually pretty badass. Not that there aren't excellent drum modules in the format, but I just like that they're so small, so you can always have a little bit of a drum thing, even if you've only got a tiny little system. A little bit of space, a lot of sound. What else? I played live with the band Ride. Well, let's be specific here. I played supporting synthesizers with the Early Years, who I play with, and the Early Years are an excellent, excellent band who you ought to check out. And Andy Bell from Ride very, very kindly invited us to support them at ULU, the London University, and support them on a London date, which was wicked. It was really fun, and they're super nice. Thank you very much for having us. I enjoyed that. And on that same day, I bought a TR8. I was in a cafe. I'm not kidding. I was in a cafe, and that's it. You can hear it there. And they were playing The Other People Place, which has just been reissued, and you should buy The Other People's Place's Lifestyle at the Laptop Cafe. And because there was so much 808 in the background, I just sort of got it in my head. I was like, oh, I want an 808. And I was basically in town waiting to catch up with the band to sort of go and sound check. I was just like, I'm just going to go to One Joe Keys and buy one. And I did. And it's great. Don't believe the haters who say that the TR-8ers don't sound like an 808ers, because as far as I'm concerned, it damn well does. It sounds wicked. And the other thing that happened this month, which is the reason this is so late, I finished an album. Don't worry about it. Finished an album. What do I know about finishing albums? Very little, as it turns out, but I can still do it. So I'll be talking more about that in due course, because it's quite, it's not a feat. Millions of people have finished albums before I have, so it's not very impressive, but by God, I'm quite pleased to have done it. And I'll talk about how I did it another day. Let's do that when it's actually out, and that will be hopefully next month, but you'll be hearing it soon. So, speaking of things that we're going to hear soon, let's talk to our friend Justin. So, in this episode today, we're going to meet a guy called Justin Owen. Now, Justin Owen is a brand. He is the man who is the company Abstract Data. And if you're into the Eurorack thing, Abstract Data are a Eurorack synth brand. They make modules. They make some very, very, very nicely well-engineered, beautifully crafted, excellent sounding and really solid, damned solid, both in terms of physical design and function, modules. They're not one of the sort of brands that I feel like they don't get enough credit. You don't hear enough about Abstract Data, I think, and he's just been around since really the kind of new boom, the kind of sort of 2008 onwards boom of Eurorack. And we talk about this in the episode because it's interesting to actually pick the brains of a manufacturer who it's his full-time job. And I think Justin is kind of what I would say a classic example of kind of the modern Eurorack pioneer brand, in the sense that he's completely self-taught. He did not go to engineering school. He did not go to Eurorack school. There is no Eurorack school. And he's not, a business person. He's not a person who did a business degree and then decided that this was the business he was going to do. He just simply was an electronic musician who had a compelling kind of drive to make something. And he just, for the hell of it, built a synth and he put it on eBay and someone bought it. And that's how it all began. And we talk about a lot more stuff as well. We talk about the impact of punk in his life. He grew up in Sydney and listening to Orbital, discovering house and techno in Sydney, early experiences, listening, learning equipment, pre-internet, the importance of music and the story of getting hooked into Eurorack, design choices, how you designed modules, how he creates modules, putting the character back into VCAs and surviving as a manufacturer in a crowded market. And finally, we wrap up this conversation talking about the music making process for Justin. And he's got quite a particular approach to making music, which I think is noteworthy, especially because it's a very good example of how to stay focused when using a modular. And modulars can be very distracting. Ironically, in the music making process, they actually distract you from the goals, from actually getting stuff done. And Justin has a very specific compartmentalized workflow which maximizes what's good about the modular and what's good about computers. And generally, he has kept him on track. And he actually makes music as Jack Patch. He makes techno, which is excellent, and you should listen to it. But first, you should listen to this. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Justin Owen of Abstract Data. Hi.
Hey.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming to my house.
Thanks for inviting me for the coffee.
That's all right. Yeah, I'm glad that you were here to join me for that experience. Any thoughts about the coffee so far?
So far, so good. I'm enjoying it. I'm having it El Natural.
Yeah, it's good. I think you get into it, though, like with coffee, I didn't used to have it black, but then I got an AeroPress, and that has actually convinced me that black is the future.
I think you have to be drinking decent coffee or good coffee if you're going to have a black and make it properly.
The amount of effort that went into the preparation of this coffee, I hope,
staggering.
warrants that. Well, yes. So I hope you're entertained. So thank you for being here. And you are Justin. Your company is Abstract Data.
Correct.
And you're based in London.
Check.
But you have a very weird English accent.
I do.
Where are you from, Justin?
I was born in North London, believe it or not.
Really?
Yep. Born in North London, lived a little while in Luton when I was younger, and then we moved to Sydney in Australia when I was 5 or 6 years old.
What's it like growing up where were you in Sydney? Or in like suburbs? Or?
I was in the western suburbs. I was in an area called Bankstown, which doesn't have a very good reputation.
Right.
It was characterful. It was character building. I think it's one of those things that when you're young, you kind of just brush through it. But it was it's kind of why I always pick people up on the stereotype of people living by the beach and surfing and watching Neighbours, because that's the complete opposite.
So what was it when you say characterful? Can you please
Bankstown
illustrate my stupid English brain?
Okay, so Australia is. It's suburbs. It has vast, sprawling suburbs. It's not a centralised area as say, for example, England. or London, with densely populated kind of outer urban areas. The suburban sprawl goes on for miles and miles and miles. So the western suburbs is generally considered one of the, I don't want to have my fellow countrymen sort of writing in to complain, but it's considered one of the poorer areas.
Yeah.
An anecdote about Bankstown. In the early 80s, there was a movie called Puberty Blues about two teenager girls that wanted to go surfing. They wanted to go break the male-dominated surfing culture, and they wanted to get... And it's about growing up and falling in love and blah, 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 blah. And they showed it as a sex education movie. It was rated so highly. It was, a way to teach young kids about, the trials and tribulations of becoming a teenager. And the first scene where the two girls go onto one of the southern beaches with their surfboard, someone in the background yells out, "Go back to Bankstown." So that's Bankstown.
Were you, we were mentioning before we started this that you had like a 202 and stuff. So my question is going to be like, your sort of formative musical education, what was it and where did it come from? Yeah,
me and music is kind of, I think any of the questions you're going to answer me, there isn't going to be like, I went to a gig and I changed. It's
a general gravitation.
Yeah. One of the great things about living in an area like Bankstown was that it's a very multicultural area. And it's an area where people don't really mix. It's the 80s, so subcultures were still a really important thing. The stereotype is that you get into one style of music and you stay there and you wear the outfit and you do the thing. I was very lucky to grow up amongst a group of people that we hung out with a lot of very different people. So I was getting into, at the same time I was getting into electronic music, I was getting into guitar bands. So I was listening. It wasn't just discovering dance music. It was also playing and forming the first bands and whatnot. So electronic music, I think, goes back as actually hearing electronic music was early clubbing days, so late 80s, I guess what you would call a jacking sound, so that kind of Chicago, Detroit, early electro, pre-techno kind of hybrid.
Is there actually good stuff being played as well? Like you had good clubs there, basically, with good tastemakers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's weird. It's on the other side of the planet, so culturally a lot of people assume maybe it's going to be a backwater, but I think Australia has always really punched way above its weight, and New Zealand, I would say, punched way above its weight for its ability to get the right people out.
Yeah.
I saw Frankie Knuckles, I saw Joey Beltram, I saw Orbital, and this was late 80s, early 90s.
Well, yeah, I was going to say Orbital would be a bit later, but yeah.
Orbital, first time I saw Orbital was New Year's Eve 91, 92. Man, and that was their first full live set, is what I believe.
You saw?
Yeah, we saw. Yeah,
amazing.
So yeah,
what was that? Was that? Presumably that wasn't the first. Was it the first kind of thing of that nature that you'd seen, like as in with the full rig, that kind of thing, or had you seen?
I'd seen.
So obviously you heard DJs, but in terms of the live stuff, particularly.
Yeah, that was the first electronic performance I think I saw. There'd been a lot of people, emceeing over with the DJ. I'd seen people bring pianos, the kind of big Italo piano house thing.
Oh, nice.
Big, yeah. So
what, an upright or like a
digital
right,
piano?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So like an M1 or something.
Yeah, hopefully. But Orbital was the first, live electronic performance that I'd seen, and at that stage, I wasn't making music at that stage. I wasn't making electronic music at that stage, and I didn't really know. I was a clubber, I was a punter. I didn't really know much about DJ culture.
Yeah.
But I knew about bands and I knew about working a mixing desk because I'd seen dub artists perform. So there was a connection to that. It was amazing. It was, genuinely a life-changing experience.
I was going to say, I mentioned, I'm interested that you say this because Orbital was also my first live.
Yeah.
It was my first live gig, full stop, was Orbital. That was in 99. So I'm a little younger, but... my own feelings, I remember that gig, and the only way that I can put it is like a sense of awe, but in like the true meaning of the word, or like dread, like but not like I wasn't. I've said this before, but like not that I was scared, but just it's an awesome show, and you're just looking at these two sort of people like gods above you, kind of. And you're like, how are they doing what they're doing? How is that sound made? How is this music even constructed? What do they know in order to be able to be capable of what I'm witnessing them doing? It's like the best basically think it's that quote, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And it's like, I think anyone's early experiences of something like that, it's like watching kind of wizards at play, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was. I'd never, I'd been clubbing and it was that was probably one of the first big non-club events that I'd been to. And I'd heard a lot of techno and a lot of house and other things up until that point, but I'd never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
And I'd never been to an event like that.
It's mad. That's the very early days when you were playing like Chime.
It was literally
like the Green Album, basically.
Yeah, there was a record store in Sydney that we all used to trek into town to go, and it was the classic record store where you could go, I want something a bit like this and a bit like this in this genre, and the guy would pull out a record that you would have for the rest of your life. And that's where I didn't buy it, one of my mates did. They bought the first album, the first Orbital album, had to be like the week it came out.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they were playing, within 6 months of that.
Yeah.
Most of the people that I was going clubbing with originally were into, I guess, what you'd call a progressive house sound now. They were the first kind of serious clubbers I knew. And I enjoyed it. It was good clubs. It was good times. It was a fun night out. But the sound never really grabbed me. So it wasn't until I started going to nights that were playing kind of tougher, kind of more American house, more stuff edging towards techno, that I started to go, yeah, this is a music that I want to do. I'd been playing in bands for years. I've been playing in sort of punk and hardcore bands since I was 16. And I was doing less of that at that time. So I started learning how to DJ. So that was where my electronic music interest started, was with, 2 turntables. And from there it was, I started, the character of the neighborhood I lived in was that there was a lot of pawn shops. So there's a lot of, sort of secondhand stores where people would get rid of stuff. So you could buy stuff quite cheaply. So I bought an Ensonic ESQ1.
So it's a sequencer, or is it the sampler?
It was the keyboard. It was the full keyboard and a sampler, on, an 8-bit sampler on things loaded off floppy disks.
It's got a sequencer strap to it, hasn't it? Or has it?
I don't. Yes, it does. I believe so. I don't.
Did you not use the? I didn't use the sequencer.
Yeah. Seriously, I don't want to come across. It's weird, talking like now. I run a modular business and I do this and I can do this. And back then, genuinely had no idea what I was doing. Yeah,
none of us do when we start.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing with Orbital is, I have no doubt. I don't know this, but it's not like. There's no like techno, late 80s techno finishing school. No. It's just abuse things the best you can, and abuse like abuse of the musical equipment type is best done with out of complete ignorance.
Absolutely. Experimentation.
Push buttons. With something like a 303, you've got to push buttons because the old lady that you bought it off wouldn't have the manual, so you just and there's no internet.
Yep.
So you're not going to get a manual reprint from Roland, so you just have to push the buttons, which is what people did.
Yeah, I think the 303s
came out.
Yeah, 303 is probably a good, great example of that, because the sound that we all equate with the 303 sound, it is abusing the instrument. It's taking it completely out of its intended, use.
Yeah. So you got. What did you say? You got an ESQ1.
I got an ESQ1 and had one of the early Roland samplers, which I can't even remember the name of it. But
a black one.
One of the black about 3.
A big one.
S50 maybe.
I don't know much. Roland samplers, like the old samplers, never get much kind of love. I know like Ronnie Size used one, but not many other people did, I think.
No, I remember they had quick discs. So I bought the sampler and a box full of quick discs and I had an early Mac.
Right.
Very early Mac running Cubase Lite. So that was my rig, early Mac. I ended up buying a second ESQ1. So I had 2 SQ1s and this Roland S50 or something.
Whatever.
And knew nothing about MIDI, had never used a sequencer. Managed to find enough friends that knew someone that knew someone. Could get stuff plugged in and get it talking to each other. And again, like you say, this is pre-internet. You couldn't get onto a forum. You just had to work it out. And I didn't have the manuals. Yeah. And then eventually had sort of got the first inklings of tracks. At the time, musically, the kind of club style that was grabbing me was, there's a lot of stuff that was coming out of San Francisco at that point that was technically it was house, but it was a bit tougher, and it was a kind of good balance of tough and funky. But the good part of it had all these amazing breaks. The break in the middle was kind of break beats, and that really grabbed me. That kind of sound really had an impact on me. So the first electronic stuff I started doing was breakbeat, was electronic breakbeat.
Right. Was that, I mean, is it in any way inspired? It's interesting when you were saying you lean towards the harder side of things. And I mean, I wondered this about, like, you know, if you track back far enough, it's like, why do we have an affinity for electronic music at all? It's like, what gives us the proclivity to be interested in it in the first place? Whether other people are like, I friggin' hate electronic music, I listen to classical music.
Yeah.
I wonder that. Like, I mean, I'm almost going to ask you, can you think why you had that? I mean, but it seems like if you have a punk background, you're going to be, there's something very punk about techno music, and it's obviously like a harder, faster, more pure style of music, and that is a brilliant description of techno. Is like, it is just hard and pure. It's just, do you have any inkling of why, you know, you have that proclivity? What is the, you know, why it appeals? Or is it just friends play it and you have warm feelings because you're with your friends at those times, and it just, therefore, that just, it's like you get imprinted, you're like in an impressionable time. I don't know. It's something I'm trying to work out.
Yeah, I don't think I could overstate, you know, I don't want to gush, but I genuinely couldn't overstate the importance of music in my life. Just could not do it. It's been the one thing, the one constant that, and I don't know why it had such an impact, but it always has. I have been as impacted by hearing are we allowed to swear on this?
Yeah,
okay, cool. All right, cool. So the first, I think the first proper punk tune I heard was the Dead Kennedys' Too Drunk to Fuck 7-inch. And there's a guy at school that had that, and I borrowed it. And again, I'd never heard anything like that. I'd never seen artwork like that on a cover. That had an impact on me. Hearing Orbital's first album, hearing early Public Enemy stuff, there's just something about music, full stop, that pushes my buttons. I think with electronic music, it would be the beat. There is something about the beat and the rhythm that I find just irresistible.
Yeah. I thought I'm only relatively recently been getting into techno, I must say. Like, a proclivity for the 4/4 beat has something that I've only recently, like, for a long time I was kind of snobby about the 4/4 beat. A lot of Orbital, some of it is 4/4, but a lot of it is kind of breaky, and it isn't 4/4. But from dancing in, like, from only relatively recently getting into dancing in clubs to techno, is like, I've had a renewed respect for the 4/4 beat. And I think anyone who says it's lazy is missing the point.
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
It's like, I'm afraid it's not to do with it being easy, it's just to do with it being the pulse of the venue. It's literally the heartbeat, and that's that's the flow of the heartbeat. The heartbeats beat in 4/4, so that's what we dance to.
I think it's one of the things with 4/4 music is it's very easy for people that it's very easy. I think firstly, it's very easy for people that aren't into that kind of music to write it off as very simplistic. Yeah. But I think people that are very seriously into it, whether they're producers or punters or DJs or whatever, realize that there are some, there's a lot of subtleties. There's a lot of very little things.
Absolutely. It's more like akin to electro in the sense of, like, some of the best electro records. The best way of describing it is like a Swiss watch, in the sense, like, it's just the right amount of parts to function, and every part is necessary, and without it, the watch doesn't function.
Yeah, and the smallest incremental changes to take you somewhere else.
And like Daft Punk as well, and everyone's they're just sampling and it's easy. It's like, you have a go and see if you can write a record that's as catchy as that. It's like, it's not, and it's every element is essential, and to write music in that way is freaking hard.
Yeah, it's very easy to write. Particularly nowadays, you can bang together a shit drag and drop prefab loop techno or house track or whatever on an iPad. In minutes, sure. But it's
also
not...
the technology has made it too easy for us to fill the space as well. Like, the beauty, like, almost the thing that we didn't realize was helping us massively when we, in the early 80s or in the late 80s and early 90s, is the fact that because you only had 4 boxes, you could only make a certain amount of sound. So it's you can't cheat by just layering things upon layering things upon layers.
Yep.
And my biggest issue with the music that I'm making is like I just massively try and crowd the space.
Yeah.
And it's like no. You just start with a really good solid foundation and just let it rock, and like don't just hang. You know, it's like the old rolling a turd in glitter thing. It's that have a really good turd.
Start with a really good turd.
Start with a really good turd.
Just one good turd.
Put zero glitter on that turd, because you know it's good shit, man. It's like I'm stretching this analogy, but yeah, it's. And at the time, you couldn't overdo it. It's so easy to overdo it now. I think that's maybe part of the good thing about modular is that modular is almost, in terms of the actual, quantity of voices in your system, we're getting back to that sort of era where you've really only got 4 things that you can have going concurrently, unless you've got a limited budget.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the limitations are a good thing. No disrespect to the amazing power that modern computer-based music systems give you, but I think there's a huge case for limitations, working within a smaller palette.
Yeah, I'm actually more in a way. I am in awe of people who use computers in a controlled way. So like I was listening to Perk last night, which is and that's a good example of subtlety. And some of his tunes are so stripped, it is just literally a 4/4 and just a sample of just one element, and it's so good. And also even within those those little elements, so I was chatting to a friend Adam, and it's I'm saying there's like so much humor as well. There's a lot of dark humor, and actually the best word is like dry humor, and to sort of convey that sense through just 3 elements just repeating and looping. It's by limiting yourself, you really do. I don't know. He's very creative. Frankly, is the reality. It is a creative art form. It's within this limited framework. What can I do that's never been done before? And yet he finds interesting and funny and dry ways of building up a tune, and tunes that absolutely slam as well. That sound amazing.
Sound huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So you have moved to London. And I'm basically trying to get us back into the Euro world. So obviously, you've moved back. Where does abstract data kind of come into your life? What is the actual process by which you go? I assume it wasn't full time. It is full time, just to be clear.
It is full time.
It is full time.
I'm trying to make it full time at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but I imagine it wasn't all the time. And how? What caused you to want to start a company? Or how did it, what have been your experiences so far?
Yeah, I started Abstract Data a long time after. I'd been back in London probably, a decade, and I'd done some, various musical projects between the time I arrived back. I came back to pursue music, basically.
Right. Making music?
Yes.
Or not making equipment,
making music. Yeah. The point of starting to make equipment really just came out of kind of nowhere. I'd been earning my living as a music producer for a few years, doing a range of, I guess, stuff that generally gets called corporate, doing music for videos, music for commercials and stuff like that.
In London?
Yeah, in London. Yeah.
That's good.
And I was
to be able to do that it was no mean feat.
Yeah, it was the few years before it became, I don't want to say trendy, but it was the last few years before the music libraries, where everything became free. It was the last few years of music still having some worth and some value, and people still having the budgets to pay a composer to put together a piece of music, rather than now, it's limitless sound libraries and sound sources and whatnot.
It's websites where you can just download a backing track
for pennies on the pound. Exactly. Which was great, and I was working entirely in software at that point.
What sort of era is it? What year are we talking roughly?
8-9 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, 10, 11 years ago, I would say. Yeah. Abstract Data.
Early 2000s, basically.
Yeah. The first thing I built was probably just nearly 10 years ago now, I would say. And two things happened. One is I kind of had a hankering for some hardware again. I was working entirely in the box, and I'd started with a hardware rig, and I thought, wouldn't it be nice to get back to having something hands-on? I didn't know what was out there. I was kind of out of the gear loop. And secondly, I was increasingly getting a bit dissatisfied with using the computer as a a creative tool.
Yeah.
I'd started playing guitar again. I'd started playing a bit of percussion again, both of which are kind of hands-on things, very intuitive, you can just pick a guitar up and play. Whereas a computer, it's the setup and the installs and this and the configuration.
It's
and
the
it's
opposite
endless.
of immediacy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not live.
So those two things, I was, okay, what is out there? What's a synth that I can buy? What's an analog synth that I can buy? I wonder if I could make one, like maybe as the kit. And again, at this point, I was at a point where I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what was out there. And I decided I would just start tinkering with electronics and I would start making.
That's quite a weird leap of faith.
Yep.
That's not what I think when I'm like, I need a coffee, so I'm going to make a French press.
Yeah. I'm a bit like that.
Okay.
Yeah. If I want to listen to what's a piece of music that I can put on? We'll need to form a band. We'll record the album. Yeah. It really, honestly, it came out of nowhere. But then
that is bizarre. But how did you have the damned impudence to think you could do it? It's
nothing if
where do
not,
you start?
I started with a chip called the 555, and that's a lot of people's kind of gateway drug, I think, to electronic hardware.
All I know about that is it goes buzz.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it does.
It gets used for buzzers.
Yeah. There's a circuit that's been around the internet forever called the Atari Punk console, and it's basically one oscillator modulating another. And
it's FM.
Yeah,
or is it?
Essentially, that's maybe a bit complimentary.
Yeah. Okay.
It's closer to the buzzer, doorbell kind of sound. But I was just fascinated by it. It was another thing that just for no reason, I can't explain it to you. I don't know why. It just had a hook in me. And I started exploiting these chips.
It does seem to have like a slight crossover with punk and electronics. It clues in the name. But it's also gnarly and it will sound, I imagine, sounds very techno.
That was the thing. I was instantly back to the sort of sounds that I loved. And I don't want to say that I'm into kind of harsh, aggressive kind of sounds because a lot of the stuff I like is positively tame compared to some of the.
Well, I don't think Orbital are not that. At least
no, absolutely not.
It's quite non-punk as well. It's quite soft and melodic.
Oh, very melodic. Pleasant. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But we played on a big system, so still.
I don't. I love that as well. I listen to a lot of different styles of music and I've been influenced by a lot of different styles of music. Sure, I played punk rock and hardcore for a lot of years and I like my techno, but I don't, I will happily sit down and listen to ambient or jazz or a film soundtrack. So it's not all about harder, faster for me.
So you're playing around with 555 timers.
Yep.
So you're building, what were you building? Like, do you have an idea in your mind of what you're trying to create here? Like, you're like, I want a 101 again, or a 202?
Yeah,
you had a 202, you said.
Yeah. One of the few kind of proper analog synths, legendary analog synths I've owned was the MC202. But yeah, I basically wanted to build a 101. That's pretty close. I wanted a little bass line synth. I want something that I could do sequence bass lines. So once I pushed the 555 a lot further than other people were doing. So I had, started using Vactrols to add voltage control to things.
Make Noise didn't even exist at the time. Actually, it's probably just about starting to exist at the time.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I just thought of, okay, well, this is what I want to do. How can I do it? What is out there that I can do these things?
Are you reading sort of electronics textbooks? Presumably, unless we've missed something, you didn't go to like engineering school or something.
No, I have absolutely no formal training in anything whatsoever.
You just reading books? Or
we
did have the internet then, obviously. It's 2007, so or thereabouts.
Yeah. You could do a lot of work. And there's a lot of sites. There was the Music from Outer Space site. That was one of the first kind of stopping points for me. And there are a lot of really good electronic forums. And like most things, I wasn't the first person to do it.
Yeah.
I might have come up with a couple of interesting ways to do things. And maybe I was the first person to, one of few people to... The first thing I built was basically a sequenced synth. So, you had an 8-step sequencer, a couple of oscillators, PWM, but all just rickety and rackety as hell.
No filter?
No filter, no, absolutely. No envelope generator even. It was
Holy crap.
Always on.
What music did you make with this again?
just
I was still working on my ambient album. It didn't sell very well.
No. I mean, if you want, look, go to the YouTube channel for Abstract Data is Abstract Juzz. And that's
JUZ.
JUZ, yeah. That's got everything I've ever built on there pretty much. So have
you got like a demo of your...
I'm pretty sure that's on there. Yep.
Okay, we'll check that out.
Yeah, for sure.
Nice. So you build this thing. I know what do you do with it? As in, it's for you, presumably. It's not for someone else. It's just a plaything.
It was for me, yeah, absolutely. It was a pet project for me. And it sounded awesome. I loved it. But by the time that I'd gotten to the point where I could put a thing together, I was beginning to think, I could do this. I could enjoy doing this. So
you enjoyed the process of building that toy, basically.
Yeah, and learning how to do it and solving the problems and doing the design. So I sold it. I put it up on. I made a video, put it up on YouTube,
right?
Put it up on eBay, and sold it.
Holy shit!
Yeah.
So it's gone.
It's gone.
Who's got it?
I don't know. Don't know.
Someone. That's worth something.
I had.
I hope it was worth something.
Yeah. I did have a guy contact me a few years ago saying, "You're the guy from Abstract Data. You built this. I've still got it, and I still use it."
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. So I built another one, and I did the same thing. Yeah. And every time I got a few more followers, and made a little bit more money. The next one had people that didn't get the last one bidding for it. And then I did 4 in total, I think. And then I thought, bumped it up. I did a series called the Hex series, basically a series of 3 little noisemakers, little self-contained guitar pedal sized noisemakers. And this is long before Korg had kind of done the micro series, years. And there wasn't anything like it out there then. I just figured that this is kind of, certainly long before Roland had done the boutique series.
You were like, this is the kind of thing that people who want to dabble in hardware will want. Something fairly low commitment that's not like some mega machine. It's just a toy.
Absolutely.
Like a jamming toy.
Yeah, and that was partly necessitated by the market. It's like, I don't want to buy a mega synth, and I couldn't afford a mega synth at the time. So I figured, I've got enough musical background that if I can find a use for these, a little noise generator, a little oscillator, and a little kind of effects and feedback thing, and a little tiny sequencing rhythm manipulation thing, other people will use them as well. So I think I did about 100 each of those.
I remember it's like the early days of, around that time, like looking on the music thing blog, and there was a sort of kind of smattering of little things like starting to emerge. Like I remember there was that sort of CD-sized one that had 16 knobs around the outside of it. Do you remember that thing with jacks inside? I was like, those kind of proto toys that probably, had it existed, would have become a Eurorack module or something at the time.
Possibly, or
a Kickstarter or something. But it was like the market was, like you yourself, obviously a good example. It's just like people were just so sick of computers by about the late aughts. It's like by that time, the hardware has gone long gone, and we're just craving a new or an old way of making music, just to sort of, I don't know. It was the same thing for myself. Like it was around that sort of time when I'm just thinking, I've kind of gone hardware, then software, and then now I'm just looking for ways to just be like it used to be.
Yeah, again. Absolutely.
Like I made better music when I had less stuff.
Yeah.
And the computer is almost like having too much stuff in a studio. It's just too blank a canvas.
Yeah, I think the power that it gives you is sometimes it gets in the way. And this isn't some sort of anti-computer thing.
No, you have to have a computer. Well, you don't have to, but like for me personally,
completely agree. Yeah. And I'm. The power that a modern DAW gives you is still awesome and amazing, and I don't have a problem with someone who's doing good tracks in Ableton or whatever.
It's more just it requires discipline, which I think is so in short supply with the people who buy music.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah,
it's a discipline issue because if you were truly disciplined, you should just be able to make wicked tunes with Cubase and nothing else.
Yeah, I think there's less fun. It's less creative for me. I spend all day on a computer. Computers for me are now about running the business and maintaining the spreadsheets and checking email and business things. That's not a creative experience for me. I guess partly I'm influenced by the fact that I do play other instruments. I play guitar, for example, and a guitar, you can pick it up, you sit it in your lap, and you can play, and that's it. And there's no, you can just be totally just you and the guitar, and I love that. I want that experience with making electronic music. That's one of the things that drew me to modular. It's the first time that I felt like I'm back to making music rather than writing or programming, programming a tune.
So
I'm actually making a piece of music.
It's the brain to hand, like the delay of
Absolutely.
brain to hand, basically.
Yep.
Things happening the instant you think they need to happen.
Yeah, and being able to, stand up and, little things, being able to stand up and kind of, shake your ass as you're playing. If I want to play guitar and I want to put a strap on, I can just jump around the room like I'm
Strap on the guitar.
Exactly, yeah.
But yes.
or anything else.
It's punk.
Of course.
But, yeah, no, absolutely. It's 1,000,000,000% is the point. I mean, I don't know. I have wondered why, with computers being so powerful, why has someone not done like a kind of, what I'm describing is basically push, but like a hardware interface for computer software that's actually doing the heavy lifting.
Is this an appropriate time to tell your listeners about the dream I had about you one time?
Please tell me. I don't know how this is going to end, listeners.
I dreamt that you had a sort of a black obelisk type object, kind of book sized, that was essentially a brain to techno converter.
Oh my God.
And you let me play with it for a while. Instantly I was hearing some of the best techno that I've ever made in your little no knobs, no dials, no nothing. Just,
and literally it turned your thoughts into
pure
techno.
interface, yeah. And you got quite upset when I wouldn't give it back.
Well, it was very important to me that I spent a lot of time thinking it up.
Yeah.
Do you know, I actually have thought about that, like, because what I'm getting at, I'm jealous of guitarists because the guitar is that. In a sense that the guitar, you can, if you know how to play a guitar, you can think a melody and it just appears in the air.
Yeah.
And people can read your thoughts if your thoughts happen to be a melody. And it's like you can do that on a piano, but as an electronic musician, I just don't, as a person who can't play the piano, I don't have that conduit. And I've always fantasized about the idea of just being able to think ideas.
Yeah, being able to improvise, being able to play music as you go is one of the kind of the frontiers of electronic music that I would like to see. And actually not, when I say improvise, I don't mean, in particularly in Eurorack now, there's a lot of people that are, improvised electronics.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, no. And, look, improvising...
You're talking about something else.
Improvising, actually playing music as opposed to, I wonder what happens if I plug this in here.
Right. Yes. Knowing what's going to happen, you mean, as in that you really do, I am playing this note next.
Okay. So you think of, I guess, jazz, for example, is one of the obvious examples. You see a great horn player. They will freestyle a solo. They're not playing it off the dots. They're not reading the music. They're not playing it by rote. They're playing something that is just literally just coming from their heart and their ability and their skill. Guitarists do it as well. A guitarist that will play a solo or a rhythm that is just in the moment. That's what I would like to see. Something I would like to see with electronic music. Yeah, and I think.
Do you mean as in something that's not techno, basically? Because
there's nothing to say that it can't be techno.
Yeah.
I mean, you can.
But you're talking about the specificity, as in it is literally that passage being played now, and I am physically making it happen. Because obviously people are improvising, but they don't know what's going to happen. Do you mean as in a musician is privy to, they know what's going to happen when they do it?
Well, you can still set limitations. I mean, a blues guitarist can improvise a blues solo. They're limited by the key that they're playing in, the tempo, the feel. They're not suddenly doing some weird interpretational aleatoric piece. They're still playing the blues.
Scale. Yeah.
So there's nothing to say that you couldn't improvise, doing live techno that still sounds like proper techno. I think it's one of the things with electronic music, again, like I said, particularly in Eurorack, is that experimental and improvised, unfortunately, I think often tends to have these connotations of I'm literally just making it up as I go. So there might not be any harmony, there might not be any rhythm, there might not be any melody.
I see.
And to me, they're still important.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, because that's fundamentally what I'm trying to do is I would like to have improvised melodic. To have a melodic element, hook is critical, I think. I think if you don't have... If you are one of the, I don't know, I'm sort of selling it short, but if you're making like hard techno, there's a grammar that it's okay, a vocabulary that's okay to not have melody. Basically, I think that does make it easier. I think it's coming up with an irresistible hook is difficult.
I think you could have a hook with the way that you modulate a percussion line. It doesn't necessarily have to be notes in the key of whatever. Of
course,
you could take a...
And that's what it is, like, techno where it's not based on a melody is based on almost a call and response of elements being played, one after the other in repetition.
Yeah, but it still has rhythm. Yeah, melody, it doesn't have to be, 3 oscillators in harmony. It doesn't have to be a chord. Yeah.
So, but what is it that you're not getting? Do you know what I mean? As in, what are you not hearing that you'd like to hear from these?
It's not so much the hearing. I think it's the process of sitting at a computer and click here, drop down menu, drag and drop. That's as far as you can.
As far removed as from the stage of Ronnie Scott's as you can possibly get.
Yeah. So I got closest to that, or I get closest to that when I'm using the modular. I'm not just making it up as I go. I know that a certain module will give me a certain set of sounds, so there are limitations. You're improvising in the same way that a guitarist can improvise, or a jazz trumpeter or whatever can improvise within a certain set of parameters, the key, the tempo, the style, whatever. You can do that with electronic music, and it doesn't have to be techno. It could be whatever you want. You can do that in a similar way with a modular system that is well set up and well thought out, that but still make it up as you go.
That is definitely my aim as well. It's just to try and make that a possibility, but also to have hooks.
Yeah.
To have like irresistible hooks. But it's difficult because, like in videos that I've done where, you watch the video and you're like, that's a really good riff. It's like what you're not seeing is the 3.5 minutes where I was like slightly chiseling away, because it's like sculpture. It's just like not that note, that note, then that note. And it's like, it's an iterative sculptural process where you start from all note possibilities and whittle it down, and then you're left with your amazing hook. But I suppose the skill is just in terms of is kind of making that process, the whittling process, sort of musical somehow, or making it always work musically. I don't know. It requires a certain sort of forgiveness on behalf of an audience, I think, or I don't know. Maybe it just takes being a genius and being like, I just need that melody. But then it's the brain to hand interface of like, how do you get that in? And frankly, the most efficient way is a piano. That is the best, quickest way.
Yeah, maybe there's probably elements of truth in both of those things. I think that you do, playing live, you do have a lot of forgiveness. The audience, proper live performances, the audiences, they don't notice a lot of things that you notice. Yeah, and that's not to say you can get away with, being sloppy. It's just they're hearing a different set of parameters.
Yeah, they are.
But I think also, it's easier to talk about, blues guitarists can just play the blues. I think it's okay to have an element of electronic music being discovering sounds, and you can do that with software as well. You can get it wrong. You can spend that half an hour of completely unproductive studio time for the 5 minutes of, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I think that's an okay.
You have to sort of find a way of doing that kind of naked in front of an audience. That's the trick to doing it live in a truly live fashion where you've not worked out beforehand. I guess, I suppose, to slightly fast forward is going to be the question is, how do you then get into Eurorack from your Hex range of little groove boxes around sort of late 2000 or 2007, 8 sort of era?
Yeah.
How do you then, because Eurorack, 2007 is kind of the flowering year for the format, it feels like.
I think so.
For a while you would only have kind of Tip Top Audio, who else? Plan B, other folks, not many. I'm trying to
No.
think who was kind of players. Analog Solutions and Systems.
Yep.
Dupfer, obviously.
Dupfer, yeah.
But then that was kind of it. And then you got Tip Top. And I feel like it was sort of almost Tip Top that were like the chisel. Then other people just, it sort of blew it open. I don't know, maybe it's not fair to say it was just Tip Top doing it, but they were sort of one of the bigger players. They're one of the people starting at that sort of time that are still a big player today, I guess is what I mean. And it feels like they sort of paved a way for creative, different sort of things, which is unfair to all the other manufacturers. But
no, I think that for me, that kind of that first wave or the second wave, I guess if you want to call for an Analog Solutions and Analog Systems kind of part of the first wave, I think that second wave, it was pretty much totally US manufacturers.
Yeah. So then, when do you make your first Eurorack module?
Yeah, it's weird. It's another kind of completely obtuse way of getting into something. I started doing desktop stuff because that was my interest. And I started wanting to take it a bit more seriously, particularly when I started designing the Hex series. So I wanted to start getting some test equipment. I was only working with just the most rudimentary gear for the first few builds. So I wanted to get, for example, a clean sine wave to do testing. Get a clean sine wave in, get a clean sine wave out. You're obviously doing something okay. So, but buying test equipment, it's proper test equipment. For the lab or the workbench, it's prohibitively expensive. It still is. So I discovered Eurorack. I discovered that you could set up a power supply reasonably cheaply. You could set a rack reasonably cheaply, and you could buy modules, secondhand on eBay. And by complete coincidence, I had a friend who was selling quite a big, very, very poorly maintained Dupfer system.
When you say poorly maintained, can you mean it was filthy or it was just not well chosen?
It had been sitting in a studio, a commercial recording studio, from pretty much as long as Dupfer had existed, I think. And I think it was one of those...
For well over 10, 14, 15 years.
Yeah, seriously. It was all revision 1 PCBs. There were things that had broken that people didn't realise they were broken. There would be people plugging outputs into outputs and
leaving them there for days.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just messing around with it. I don't think anyone. Yeah. I think the guy that I bought it off, he actually inherited it as well. So I don't think even he knew what it was. No. There were things that it was a mess. It was a really sorry bag of wires. It was really quite upsetting. But I got enough out of it to be able to set up some basic test kit. So I had an oscillator. I was able to reproduce a basic kind of oscillator, envelope generator, filter, LFO, VCA synth voice, like a mono synth voice.
So is this with mind... Why were you doing that? As in, were you thinking of dropping in your own component into the path, or you just wanted your 101?
No.
Finally I've got my 101 again.
Building it. Initially it was, I just want a hardware synth to play and to jam to. Is kind of that whole thing of just getting back to the spontaneity of being able to just play music. And I could play guitar and I could play other things, but I couldn't just... I didn't have any way of just taking an hour out of my day and just going into a room and just jamming, just playing.
Doing what you do on guitar with a synth.
Exactly, yeah. So that's where I started. But by the time I got to the Hex series, I was beginning to look at it as a potential, I guess, potential business. Not so much a potential business opportunity, but something that I'd become quite serious about and quite intrigued by.
You were still doing sound making on the sidelines. Clearly this was not paying your bills.
No, absolutely not. It was all money out for a lot of years. I was still sort of doing production for hire. But as soon as I got the first Eurorack stuff, I was hooked instantly. That's I was hooked. It was, theoretically, it was just test kit. And I knew nothing about Eurorack. I didn't, again, I started not knowing anything at all about it, but the format and the idea and, the idea of it being a modular system that I could chop and change and adjust to whatever way.
I think as soon as you clock what it is hugely, if you don't know anything about electronic music, you're like, damn, that sounds like a dream come true. It's if I don't like the filter, then I don't have to throw away my whole synth. I can
for sure.
Put that out
and just buy another one.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's quite important to establish, like, your first forays or your first modules. I'm not even sure what the first module you released was. Or was it just one? Or
It was a wave shaper. Yeah. I did an analog wave shaper.
Yeah.
That was.
Was that then as well, like in 2008 or 9 or there?
No, this is a bit later than that. I would guess sort of 2011ish.
What was your reasoning for that? You felt there wasn't anything good enough or interesting enough, or
it was partly experimentation. It was building things that I think one of the things I'm really lucky with, and I don't want to sound conceited, but I think one of the things I'm lucky with is that because I've spent so many years being incredibly serious about making music, I feel like if I can make good calls on, look, if I think this is going to work for me, it's going to work for other people.
Many manufacturers are not musicians.
Yeah, which is, I find. I mean, we can talk about that as well. Yeah, I find.
Well, I think this is an ideal time.
Well, I think it ties into what you were saying. What do I think about Eurorack as a scene? I don't like using that word, but as a scene now, and I think that whilst I love the diversity, I think there are a lot of modules now that are made by some very, very clever people, some very talented people who are incredible coders, because I think most of the most interesting stuff is digital. I think it's pretty fair to say.
1,000,000% agree with you.
But they don't have a musical background, and I find that quite intriguing. And whilst diversity, if any scene is going to stay fresh and compelling and relevant, there has to be some diversity. Things have to change and move on. Don't want the 10,001th analog VCO. But part of that is I think there's a lot of designs that I don't know if it's necessarily a direction that I personally want to see Eurorack going in. I don't want to
be specific when we say, without naming names, but
sure.
I mean, what design trends are we talking about here?
I don't want to see Eurorack become a digital workstation with knobs. So, for example, the number of modules with screens now, that completely goes against what got me into Eurorack.
I actually do feel the same way as you on this. I'm with you.
Yeah, there's a ton of things
within reason,
Sure.
Because a screen, like, to give an example, a good example of screens is like Arturia Matrix Brute, as to make where they've made a conscious design choice that the screen is an e-ink because it is effectively just a scribble strip to tell you what these four destinations are, but to do nothing else except that. So use a screen where it's a morphing parameter, but really only use it in a dumb sense. Don't use it as a way of burying multiple sound making parameters that would be better served with a direct control.
I think there's and look, this isn't to say that there is a right way or a wrong way of doing it. There are tons of people that have absolutely no problem using modules that have got multiple layers of menus deep that are accessed through screens or key combinations or whatever you like. And if that works for you, that's fine. But for me personally, I think the not so good flip side of all the innovative stuff that's happening in digital in Eurorack is losing the immediacy of simple user interfaces.
I think you could make a really good case, and it may be unfair because we haven't gone down the path that whatever ex-designer who's put a screen on it has gone down, and maybe they've tried this and not found a solution. But you could kind of argue that a screen where it contains lots and lots of parameters, where you say, well, heck, this algorithm has got 50 parameters, then there's an argument that you should spend the time and do the work. This is going to sound unfair, but I'm just going to say it, but you should have done the work to try and pare those 50 parameters down to 3 knobs. Do you know what I mean? Where it's like, that's that perfectly chosen combination of things, which gives maybe not as broad a sonic response, but at least it only gives you 3 dials where you can just immediately turn them and get something.
Yeah, or not have 50 parameters.
Yeah.
Or not try and build a supercomputer into another format. I think the same thing when I see guitars with auto-tuners and MIDI built in and this, that, and the third. I just want a guitar,
just let me
man.
Play. Yeah. Like, there was nothing wrong.
Yeah,
no one was struggling to tune their guitars in the 70s and 80s.
No.
Or maybe they were, but they weren't. Well, they really weren't really. Maybe they were, but yeah. It's not that. There was nothing wrong with the design in that sense. And saving 1 minute is not worth, reinventing the wheel.
I can't remember how we got here.
Well, we're talking about how you're getting into, your first modules. I suppose, I guess the key thing I'd like to ask is just you've got pretty much a kind of full system, really. And it's sort of to ask a little bit about, I think the most valuable thing is to ask about what you've learned from the process of doing it multiple times. I suppose the succinct way of putting it is, if you could go back magically to Justin in 2008, it's like, what would you say to yourself? Like, dude,
get a job.
Don't do it. Stay away, man.
Get a job.
You're kidding.
Have an easy life.
Because this, I imagine, is a full-time, it's beyond a full-time job. It's not the good life. It's in fact a very hard life that clearly requires enormous amounts of discipline because you're your own boss.
Yep.
And so, but I'm still curious, what, in terms of the process by which you make modules, what have you learned? What would you change? What have you changed?
Yeah, I think I was quite lucky that I set some parameters quite early on, even before I'd done multiple iterations of doing modules. One was that it had to sound good, even if it didn't make a sound. So not all of my modules, it's only actually a majority of my modules so far have been controller and parameter things. Yeah, but using them, it had to sound good. Two, it had to feel good to use, not just physically tactile, as in the knobs feel good. It had to feel right.
How do you define that as well? If it's not physical, what do you mean just in terms of the types of shapes and?
Yeah, the physical layout of the panel and the can I get to a parameter? Not just does it fit into the workflow? And that's I did a prototype of another wave shaper. Which is going to come out as a product hopefully next year, but built into a VCO. We don't want to get too much into that. But I initially started off, a lot of the lessons I'd learnt from the first wave shaper, I built into this second wave shaper. And this is one thing a lesson that you keep on learning as a product designer is, on paper it sounded great, in simulation it worked well, everything about it was right. But as soon as I got it on the front panel, as soon as I started using it, it's like, this is clumsy. This doesn't slot into the flow. It's blocking.
What can you define how, or is it? It's very specific to that one.
No, it's not as specific as this socket.
Do you do that? You're designing it effectively on paper first, then software, then your prototype. Is it quite often you'll be like, shit, I was totally wrong about this, or I'll have to make drastic changes? Or how do you iterate in that sort of way? Yeah,
that the process is generally, concept is idea, literally scribblings on a piece of paper. I'll just sit and brainstorm for an hour, an idea that there'll be an idea that percolates, for months generally. And then I'll go, okay, so, today's the day to put this down onto paper.
Yeah.
Then it will go, you have to come at it from a product design, I think, from two ends. One is kind of dreaming the impossible dream. You have to go into it believing that you can do anything with a particular product.
That it can be solved.
That it can be done, yeah, absolutely. But you also have to come from the really boring part of, what will this knob do? What will this socket do? How many sockets, particularly in Eurorack, where you have a physical format. It has to be a certain height. You can't just make it a couple of centimeters bigger.
You also can't make it too wide.
No, you can't make it a huge thing that dominates someone's rack. So
it's normal by it, basically.
Yeah,
just to be clear, just for folks who aren't sure. Everyone's got a limited space, and you have to work within that.
And I think after a certain width, it starts to defeat the vibe of Eurorack as well. You want a collection of modules, not one big wide behemoth module, in my personal opinion.
Because you might as well have a table of a 101 and a 202.
Absolutely, yeah. And they'll probably do a better job ultimately.
Yeah.
So you start off with this kind of contradiction of doing the amazeballs stuff of dreaming and being the kind of stereotypical product designer, but you also have to be very boring and very thought out and constrained. What can we actually do? And from there you end up doing some sort of early prototyping. That can be simulation, a lot of time it's just getting onto a breadboard or some of the prototyping and development stuff and just starting to put it together. Sometimes you can hack it together out of bits and pieces of older designs. With some of the digital designs I've done, I've just gone from spreadsheet to working prototype. Just made that jump. Just had the faith that the Octo controller, for example, just kind of had the faith that would work. So there was only ever really one iteration of the hardware of that. I'm still as excited about Eurorack now as I was when I started. I don't see it getting old or a bit boring, or maybe it's not as good as I thought it was, or
it's just like saying food is boring or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to eat. We need to make music.
Yeah, and there's new stuff to do, and I'm as excited about my own designs, the next couple of years for abstract data as I am about seeing what my competition is going to come up with. So it's still an interesting place for me. There was a huge growth spurt sort of a couple of years ago where it exploded in popularity. It seemed everyone was talking about it. I think that's like anything, it's had some positive effects, some maybe less so. I think the diversity is a really good thing.
Do you mean in terms of manufacturers or users?
Yeah, both. Yeah. The number of different manufacturers coming at designing for one format from totally different directions, totally different backgrounds, regardless of what I think of the modules, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, it can cater for any taste.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, no question.
And the users even more so. I like that Eurorack. There's a place in Eurorack for everyone, from really experienced synthesists, people who are really, really pushing the boundaries of electronic music, right through to the person that is about to discover that they can make a little plinky plonky sound and stick it through a reverb and it's going to sound amazing. That is about to discover that for the first time. There's a space for everyone in Eurorack.
But
I
feel like there's a but.
Oh no, there wasn't. Okay,
no buts.
But I think that I guess one of the downsides to the explosion in the digital side of things is that there's a lot of modules that I don't really see that they bring anything to Eurorack. I think there's a lot of people, and it's kind of there's a lot of this in the world today with the internet. I made a thing, I can upload it to YouTube, I can put it on social media, I can put it on the internet, when maybe I should have just stopped at making the thing and gone, I've done this for my own enjoyment. I think there's a lot of modules. I think if
do you mean like chaff, basically, that hasn't always rehashing old problems, or not bringing any?
Just both, just not bringing anything new. If you're, and I'm not, if I want to make every single module I build, I want it to bring something new. I want to solve a problem. I want to have something unique. I want to do something interesting, something fun. I'm not interested in putting my logo on another multiple or another mixer. Okay, we've got we're doing a mixer, but that's to sit in as part of a complete product line. I think if you're, I'm
going to ask you, therefore, why does the world need another VCA?
Well, good question. Yeah.
You've just done a VCA. It's
just done a VCA.
I mean, it is a compact, triple VCA, but Dope for it has got a, compact VCA. So why do we need another? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
Let me play devil's advocate.
No, it's a good question. There's a, hopefully a good, half decent answer.
I'm listening.
Okay. So I think in Eurorack today, most VCA modules are going to be built out of one of two chips. So it's either going to be using Analog Devices chip, SSM2164, I believe, or a chip by that Corp. Yeah.
That Corp?
That Corp. That's the one.
That one. Yeah.
So, and these are fantastic VCAs. They're just incredibly well spec'd. If you build a Eurorack module that uses one of these VCAs and you implement it properly, you will come away with a VCA that is as high a spec as any human being would ever want. that's the upside. That's the good side. The downside to that is these are completely anonymous. They're completely transparent. There's no
Too
way,
transparent, you would say. Like, there's no vibe.
There's nothing. There's no way that one designer is going to put a twist on it. There's no way that a designer can bring themselves or their own personality to that design. Your one is going to sound like my one, is going to sound like everyone else's one. And so first and foremost, I wanted to do something that was an alternative to that. When you work with analog stuff, and again, it kind of comes back to, playing instruments, you understand that every single thing in your signal path brings something to the sound. It puts a little bit of its own thumbprint. Nothing too heavy, nothing too overbearing, and certainly nothing that's, it's analog, so now it all sounds like magic and unicorns. But everything creates part of the sound. So I wanted to come up with a VCA that was a good balance between, it has a high spec, it has a really good signal to noise ratio, has a very good degree of linearity, so it will follow the inputs and the outputs are very tightly matched.
What goes in, what comes out, your sine wave goes in and out,
but it's it still has musicality, and obviously, if you...
Do you mean it distorts everything?
Yeah,
how do we define what is musical?
Yeah, this is the thing. So when people talk about analog, and particularly discrete analog, and the AD50, the VCA that Abstract Data is putting out is a discrete analog. So it's individual components, it's resistors and transistors. It is
rather than a chip.
Rather than a chip, yeah. You've got everything from, I guess at the bottom end, you've got, for example, the VCA in the first revision of the Korg MS-20. That was one transistor. And I think anyone that's involved in synthesis would have to at least kind of begrudgingly agree that the MS-20 has been a reasonably influential analog synth.
Fuzzy little bastard.
Yeah, absolutely. Noisy, rackety.
Yeah, great.
Little
but
thing.
It's got character for eons.
Character, exactly. So what are we actually talking about when we talk about character and analog warmth and that? And what we're talking about is the imperfections. We're talking about the things that engineers try and design out. So I wanted to do a VCA that wasn't, having said that, I think it's also fair to say that anyone's used one of the very early MS-20s, it's not ideal. It can be pretty noisy.
I mean, like, I did the MS-20 Mini and I thought it was broken for a while because literally, because a lot of people are like, people who complain about the noise on synths, I'm like, shut up. Like, what noise, and B, what is this music that you write that requires that everything be so precise? I'm like, fucking give me so much character that I'm like, my ears are bleeding. It's like, that's why I'm interested in analog synths. Like, one of my first analog synths I got, actual analog synths, was I ended up blowing the money that my grandparents had given me to buy a car on a Schweiman S1. Which I thought was a pretty baller move in hindsight. I mean, it is, but it was actually too clean. Like, maybe I'm using it wrong and I could have driven it harder, but it's like, it's a very precise design. It gives you it does nothing more than what you tell it to do.
Yeah.
And that was not it. And actually what I wanted was an MS-20.
Yeah.
And then when I got the MS-20 Mini, it was so noisy, but I thought it was still brilliant. And I was like, and in a way I was like, I doff my cap to you, Korg, for not designing that out of the reissue.
Absolutely.
Just leaving it
as
brutally noisy as it is. Because that's what the fucking thing is all about. It's about bags and eons of character. And it's like, so don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. But please. So then getting on to an OTA VCA, basically. Yeah.
Okay, so you've got, for me, and I think this applies to any design, there is a point at one end where it is so well designed, overly designed, that all the musical character comes out. It's the imperfections. But you do have a point at the other end of the spectrum where it kind of potentially ceases to be reliable as a kind of a day-to-day music tool, and you are having to EQ things out and denoise it. Exactly, yeah. So I wanted to do something that was kind of right in the middle of that spectrum. The ARP 2600 is probably a good example of the topology of the AD50. It's not an ARP 2600 clone by any means, but it is as essentially an OTA base. If you're modulating it at audio frequencies, for example, if you're doing AM, you are going to get a slightly perceptible amount of CV bleed. And that's a really difficult thing to say because we've got this thing now where CV bleed is bad.
I mean, you're literally going to hear the audio rate signal in the front.
Absolutely, as a small addition in harmonics, and that's a good thing. Yeah, that is a musical thing. Because so many of the VCAs that we use in Eurorack are these just incredibly high spec things. The people that sell them, their data sheets are like minus 1,000 dB CV bleed. So there's this thing now that CV bleed is bad. And obviously the instant comparison is, again, the poor old Korg MS-20, whose CV bleed characteristics were atrocious, pretty much, yeah? You were hearing thumps. There is a happy medium where you can have, and doing amplitude modulation, where you can have a little bit of the input at the output, and you can have a little bit of noise.
Especially if you're doing AM modulation, then obviously you are going, you almost want to hear the CV anyway, because it's driving the tone of what
you're doing. Yeah. The other thing I think is the degree of attenuation. Again, on the AD50, it is really good. Sort of minus 60 or 70 dB. It's getting kind of
can truly close
down into the noise floor. But when people have this idea that if I turn my amp up to 11 and I can still hear a little bit of the signal going through the VCA, then that's a problem. But it's not. If you're doing any serious amount of production, and if you need something to close 100%, you will use some sort of gate in your production process. So it's about getting. I think, to be honest, I think it's a risky move for anyone to do a discrete OTA VCA that is not going, it's discrete, it sounds terrible and noisy and rackety. Instead going, it's discrete, it sounds awesome, it sounds beautiful. But I think people need to learn how to, fall in love with the kind of musicality of things and the imperfections and that's what character is.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got a baby
screaming baby is sort of strangely appropriate. That baby's, yes, that's full of character. Yeah, no, I think you're right. That's why we're interested in these machines, and that's why we're interested in filters, because we want vibe, and we're trying to find, it's analog is such a buzzword, but we're just trying to find musical inspiration, and if the tools kind of give us a little bit for free in the sense that we don't have to work quite so hard like the 303, it just kind of gives you this thing on a plate. It gives you this sound. If you put the knobs in those settings, you'll get that sound every single time, and it's hard to get it to do anything else, but that sound makes it a thing that you'll want to take to a club with you. I'm totally down with it. I think it's good. I want things that have character. The other thing I was going to ask you about, it's like the difficulty of being a manufacturer as a kind of one-man or one-woman band is that you're required to both be the designer but also the marketing person, and how there's kind of, it's hard to communicate. These things are hard to communicate, and it almost requires someone whose dedicated job it is to communicate. It's hence why you get people like me doing videos. Like, because I learned how to do that, but it's not a skill that everyone has, and it's interesting. I imagine you'll have feelings about it, because in a world where it's so crowded, it's like, how do you even get noticed anymore? If you're a manufacturer starting out, how can you have an original idea? But it's one thing to have the original idea, but it's quite another to get people to realise A, how original it is, and B, to actually pony up their money. I mean, I don't know what your feelings are about because that comes into the state of the scene. It's like, what's it like to be a one-person band in such a crowded, how loud can you shout?
Yeah, it's really crowded. It's absolutely a crowded market, and I see it changing from. I kind of feel like when I got into Eurorack, there was still an element of.
Check that this is still. Please continue.
Yeah, sure. Sorry. I think there was an element of obscurity. People valued obscurity. People would value searching out unknown modules from small bespoke manufacturers. If you look at any of the stats, if you look at any time anyone does a top 10 modules of this year, it is going to be very, very heavily weighted to players. 2 or 3 manufacturers. Yeah. And then there's the long tail. Same with sales. That is increasingly there are a very small number of manufacturers, who really dominate the market. I feel it's almost a little bit more rather through than a kind of a digging through the crates type of market that want to go and find that elusive B-side. It's kind of a little bit, maybe parts of it are now a little bit more like an iPhone market where people just want the latest iPhone and whether they need it or not.
I think you're absolutely right. There does seem to be a bit of a, I want it.
Shiny new thing from my favorite manufacturer. Yeah.
What does it do?
Yeah.
I just want it on principle. It's like, okay. But I think it's fair enough, though, in the sense that, like the iPhone, I mean, say what you want, it is a good product.
Sure.
And I mean, I guess it's just like having a good record label. It's like, the shit they put out is great. I'm going to love whatever it is that they put out.
There is a reason why these manufacturers dominate the market. Yeah, I mean,
And also that their fame is bringing interest into the format, almost certainly. I still 1,000,000% take your point, and I've been responsible for creating some like top 10s of the year and stuff, and it is hard. It's like their products, either they do stand out, but there's just a lot of other stuff. And where do you? Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer except to say.
Your question was, how do you stand out?
Yeah, how do you?
Okay, yeah. One build awesome stuff, and this comes back to the number of times I roll my eyes at new companies started up and our offering is a multiple. Build awesome stuff. Yeah. Bring something original and unique to the game. I don't like giving props to other manufacturers. We know who we're talking about. The people that everyone knows and loves, the biggest players, they make awesome stuff first and foremost. Yeah. And then you have to, you have to sort of find that fine balance between being able to promote yourself and do all the kind of business 101 stuff without looking like a corporate shill or one of these people on the internet that is constantly shouting their own name.
Yeah. As in, when you're answering some comment on a forum, it's like, oh, by the way, I actually designed this 5 years ago, and you might want to have a look at it. Yeah. Right, but that's what. But you sort of that becomes. It has to be your job to a degree. Like you've got to do it.
Yeah.
Unless you've got some, unless you can ride on just the luck almost of just having the right thing at the right time. It's never necessarily the right time to release something. Who knows?
No. I think if you're part of the long tail, which the kind of the vast majority of Eurorack manufacturers are, even a lot of awesome ones, not just the kind of the very small kind of Me Too ones. That kind of Eurorack kind of middle ground. It's a noisy market. It's a noisy, crowded market. I can't imagine what it would be like getting into Eurorack now. I see people's rigs, and this is something I'm putting together, and it's got an abstract data module in it, and there's generally 2 or 3 modules. I don't even know who the manufacturer is. I don't know what the thing does. I don't try and keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, I actually have to switch off to a degree because there are 2 different pursuits. One is the nest building of building a system, and the other one is actually using the fucking thing. Yeah. And so I think you have to, like, going on Muffwiggler and prattling on about modules is a hobby. Yeah, and using modulars is also a hobby.
Yeah.
The 2 are not necessarily related.
No.
It's like, and I don't also, when I say prattling on, I don't mean it in a bad way, because that's, it's how we discover things as well. It just is, they are mutually exclusive activities, I often find, for my own sake, because I'm not disciplined, and I really struggle with that. And it's constantly I'm thinking of ways to improve the system. And it's hard because there's always something new to improve the system with. Yeah. And it's this craving of like novelty that is one of the hardest things. It's like the most depressing thing about the format. It's just like, I almost wish that people would stop releasing things for a little while so I could just focus on using shit. It's like,
I think it's one of the pieces of advice I give to people when they want to get into Eurorack is think of one job to do. Give your system one job to start with. It can be building better baselines. It can be making a nice pad. It can be having a little bank of filters that you can put your drum loops through. Don't try and just build a wall of stuff
for its own sake.
For its own sake, yeah. I mean, or go for it.
Fuck yourself out.
Be my guest.
But no, I am 1,000,000,000% like, and actually building that my live system has reminded me that of why you're exactly right is like, if you have a purpose,
Yep.
you don't need to go on Facebook and ask what should I put in my remaining
what's
8
hot?
HP.
Yeah.
That should not be a question that you ever need to ask, because you should know what I need to put in that last HP is the thing that gives me randomness. I've been craving the ability to have some random injections of modulation or melodies.
Yeah, what's the thing that I can't do with my current rig?
Exactly. So the key is have a reason for building it.
Yep.
And if you haven't got one, don't buy a Eurorack system.
Well,
get one
no,
first.
no. Please
get
feel spend your money on Eurorack.
Build one and build it entirely on abstract data things. But have a damn purpose, because otherwise you won't know why you're building it. And because you have to become the designer to put it together. You have to sort of design a system. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing. That's a really important point. You are designing your own system for you. And, there's nothing to say that you can build a system just to mess around with before you put the kids to bed. But, if you're...
It will still help to have an idea of what you're trying to get out of it before you put the kids to bed. So I want to end by asking you about music making, because we haven't really talked about the process by which you make music. And you do have, I think you're one of the rare, I may find out that's not rare, but you're one of the rare manufacturers that does make music, obviously.
I don't think it's the majority of us.
It's not it's like people, So how, basically, pointedly, like, how do you make music with a modular is my question.
Cool, okay.
That's my question.
Yeah, all right. So I do, the sort of stuff I do with the modular under the name Jack Patch is techno. It's standard issue techno. I'm not looking to redefine or...
I would like to say I think it's really good standard issue techno.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
It's pretty like... I listened, I was like... And I mean this in the nicest possible way. It's just like when you're like, someone's like, here's my musical project. You're like, here we go. And so you put it on. I was like, shit. Oh, shit. No. Right. Okay. No. Yeah. Like this is club music. This is great. This is like, and it's actually some of the stuff I've been trying to make myself. So it's like, that's particularly why I'm interested as well, as how, please continue. How do you do it? And how do you, I suppose the slight extra spanner in the works is just, especially with a modular, how do you keep it sensible so you actually frigging get some music done? Yeah.
Okay. So this partly comes back to limitations, and I set out and having a rig that serves a purpose. I set out to build a rig to do techno with. I didn't build a rig with no direction and then I wonder if I can do techno with this. I have a structure, a very specific structure of kick, claps, hi-hats, a couple of percussion things, a rig, a couple of modules for bass lines, and a module for kind of synth lines, let's call them synth lines. And I have a sequencer dedicated to running each of those, some sort of sequencing capability dedicated to running each of those things.
The two voices and the drums.
Each of the voices, yes. Yeah. So, that and then I have a mixer that gives me each of those channels or each of those instruments on one channel. So every track I do has that lineup. It's like my band basically. I don't go on stage and go, tonight we're going to have two guitarists. We're going to get rid of the bass player. You go on stage with a drummer, a guitarist, a bass player, a singer, and whatever.
And you find a part for each one of them
and
at some point.
Everyone, and you play a particular type of music. So I've got the rig. It's 6U, so it's two rows.
So it's not big.
104 HP. No, it's a pretty modest system. Top row is all sequencing and a couple of send effects. So I've got a couple of reverbs. And the bottom row is all the noise making stuff. So noise making stuff, Tip Top 909, obvious choice for techno drums. The kick drum, the hi-hats, the clap. Baseline is an all abstract data lineup. A couple of prototypes stuff that will be released imminently. So I've got a shaping VCO, which is a prototype. That's the actual sound generator. Envelope generator and VCA are just about to come out, and the filter is a discontinued module that we've had out for a while. So that's the classic mono synth bass line.
Just one oscillator. Is there a sub-octave generator?
No, one oscillator for bass. Yeah. Percussion, my kind of go-to electronic percussion module is the Noise Engineering BI, the Bassimilus, which I just love.
It's frigging ridiculously good.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant example of like digital modules done done good.
Yeah, totally.
done so good.
Yeah, and it's quite a simple interface. One knob per function kind of thing. But I've owned it for years, and I never ever bore of the sound. Whereas I have gotten tired of a lot of other modules that have been and gone. Never bore of the sound of it, and B, I keep on discovering new things to do. I keep on discovering new sounds that I can get out of it. So that's a really high value module.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the keys. In a small rig, stuff really has to pay its rent.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to just deliver. And one that I haven't owned for as long, but it's on all the recordings I've done, is Mutable Instruments Rings.
Yeah.
Which I looked at Elements for a long time. I think it's Elements, but
yeah,
it's kind
biggie.
of it's a bit big for my rig, and Rings does a lot. And again, it's just a module that I feel like I will be able to keep going back to that for a long time.
Amen, yeah.
And getting new things out of it.
Do you find it hard to tune it though?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's something I've struggled with.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that you kind of just need to suck it up if you're doing music with a module.
Tune around it, not
yes, sort of punk rock tuning. Yeah,
it's techno, mate.
I'm quite lucky that I have a pretty good ear for pitch, and I do. You can tune things with guitar tuners or software on your iPad or whatever, as long as you signal condition
Do you
stuff.
just not mess with the tuning once you've set it? You basically set a bass tune for the session.
I tune the bass line. So I tune the bass line to G generally, which is about 48 hertz or something. And then I tune by ear the BI and the rings
to it.
And I will, if I'm just jamming, it doesn't really matter if stuff's a bit wobbly. But when I'm recording, I will go and retune a couple of times. And I have had I've had times where I've had to kill a session because I lost the tuning. I just couldn't get it back into place. But that's
part of the spirit.
Playing music live. Yeah.
So then you've got rings. Do you have that going through a filter or?
No, I use it.
Just open.
I use it so far.
So the second voice is just rings.
Yeah, so far the way I've used it is just rings, just hitting.
Well, it is a whole voice. It's
absolutely.
You just hit it with a ping and it just resonates.
And it resonates, yeah. And
you don't feed any noise into it, or?
No, but I modulate it a lot. I think that's the thing.
I'm sure Olivia would be happy about
that.
Yeah,
and you.
He would also be annoyed that you hadn't put external noise into it. But I must admit, I've barely done that myself. So
this is kind of the thing. Look, I've got a long time to discover that. That's why that module will stay in my room. I think for long because
we're only just getting started. Baby.
I can keep on doing things with it.
And it's such a good module to have in because I think it's physical modelling stuff is so ruthlessly good for techno. It was actually something because I reviewed it for Future Music. Mm-hmm. I'm fairly sure. I did say this in the review that I was like, this thing will kill for techno. This will kill for techno because it's a different vocabulary that when you juxtapose it with like traditional bass lines, you just get such a like ear catching combo.
Yeah, that I would definitely agree with. I love the Tip Top 909 modules. They just do what they say on the tin. It's 909 kick, good approximation of a 909 clap and everything. I'm not expecting it to do every kick drum under the world. I just want it to do one. Bass lines, I don't get entirely hugely imaginative with bass line. I think, working with those frequencies, particularly up loud, you want something fit for purpose, something tight,
delivers pure tone.
A little bit of dirt, a little bit, so halfway between sine and triangle. So having modules like the BI and the rings really is the gloss and the shine and everything.
Ear candy over it.
Yeah. Well, the top row is all sequencing. The master is I run 2 octo controllers.
Right.
I have one that is running all my drums. So I have one AD32 that is dedicated to I basically have an A and a B channel. So I have an A for example 4/4 kick, and then I have a B for a fill or a break or something like that. And I do this.
You just got it in the mode where it's spitting out the preset rhythms or the random rhythms.
Whatever takes my fancy.
You can sort of move it.
And I've got a
switch.
I've got a physical switching module.
Right.
Yeah, so I can switch in a kick drum fill, or I can switch between.
That's basically something I've been thinking about doing, where you've got because I've been using like circadian rhythms, where you can manually enter things, but I've kind of come to realise if you listen to techno music, you sort of don't reinvent the wheel in terms of there are certain rhythms that you almost just need as a library, and then the real strength would just become picking them at the right time. So like what I've done is using, I must admit, not using the octo controller, but another module that puts out set rhythms, basically, just having, a set of rhythms, so that I'm like, there's the 4/4, there's this, there's that, certain offbeats and things, and then using switch multiple to actually combine the gates works well. And in a sense, and I've not really gone to town with this idea, but I think I need to have just, especially with hats, like the offbeat hi-hat pattern, it's just like, it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's recognizing that if you're going to improvise music in real time, the worst thing you can do is give yourself too much to do, I think.
Pick one thing. Yeah, the two things that I use on the ADE32 are, you've got all the standard 1, 2, 3, 4 things. So for your offbeat claps, your offbeat hi-hats, your 16th hi-hats, your 4/4 kick.
Yeah,
that's
you need those things.
The bread and butter. But the loopable sample and hold, that's what brings
really good,
the life into it. So, for example, I will set up a loop on a sample and hold, and I will use that to modulate the hi-hats.
Right.
So that
the
takes
accent or something.
Accents, or the FM. So that takes it from something that is just...
Yeah. Actually, I had a Turing machine going into my 909 hats for that exact same musical result.
Yeah, and that's the thing that takes it from being cookie cutter to being yours.
How then do you track that? You have told me in the past.
I put together a patch. I just jam. So the rig is completely standalone. It's not linked to a computer or it's not slave to anything. It's completely standalone. So I start by just jamming. I just get into the zone and just jam and play around. Sometimes stuff will come together really quickly. You have good nights. You have other nights where it takes a while. I get to a point where I have the entire rig patched up. So basically the peak.
You don't start with it patched as such?
No, absolutely not.
Right.
I always pull it down. Absolutely.
That's good.
I set it up from scratch every single time. Yeah, and then I get to a point where I've got everything patched up and I guess what you would consider the peak time of a track where everything is in.
Going at full.
Yeah. And then I jam it. I just familiarise myself with it over the course of generally a couple of weeks. Get in and jam and come up with a bit that, okay, if I drop this out here and I filter that there, that's going to be kind of maybe a break. If I cut 1, 2, and 3 out and I drop the bottom end off the kick, that might make a good intro, outro / thing. So I'll get to a point where I can kind of approximate playing the track live. Not to a point where you could, go out and do it necessarily, but to a point where I'm starting to get a familiarity for the track. I can hear the parts in my head that I want. This is going to work here. This is going to sound like this here. This is going to start being modulated differently here. I've kind of got the track in my head. And then I record it. I record each part individually. And then it's all in that. At that point, it's all audio in the DAW. And from that point, I'm working in software.
So then you turn off your modular and you just arrange in the software world.
Yeah. I'm really big on compartmentalizing things in the songwriting process. I get distracted really easily. I get bored really easily. I'd like to, if I'm writing a track, I don't want to be thinking about, am I recording this? Are my levels okay? If I'm recording stuff, I just want to focus on recording. When I'm editing, I don't want to be going, maybe I'll use a new sound here. I like that by the time I get to the next stage, I'm already committed to a whole bunch of things.
The library of sound and vocabulary.
Yeah. I absolutely use the computer for everything I can get out of it. I'm a bit of a stickler for timing, so I do even just chopping stuff up to make sure that it's on, absolutely on, and note lengths and things. I'm also a person that likes to tinker with my rig, maybe not major changes, but little kind of incremental changes. At the moment, I've got a version where I'm running the entire rig off the BeatStep Pro, the Arturia BeatStep Pro, which originally I only ever used as a clock. So now I am using more of the gates and the sequencing, and I've got a template in Logic that basically mirrors my modular rig. So I've got a kind of kick, claps, hi-hats, bass line, percussion set up in my rig. So now I can use the Arturia to trigger the modular. I can use the Arturia to trigger Logic. I can pull sounds from one or the other. or I can write totally in one and play back on the other.
So what's the advantage of why bother to include a computer in that way?
Yeah, I wanted to... One of the things I found with the first couple of releases is that editing the drums, recording drums, fairly basic techno drums out of the modular, then editing them and getting all the timings, it's quite time consuming, and it doesn't really bring anything that is strictly modular to the game.
True.
You want a solid kick drum, you want the recognizable 909 style hats, you want that great clap, but you can get that. No one is going to care where that sounds came from. So part of it was a way of just maybe speeding up the recording process,
so that you actually just keep the drums in the computer and you don't then have to trim and chop them and clean them up. And
exactly. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
And from there, it kind of snowballed. It was I like the idea that I could write using a hardware sequencer, but in software. Didn't, if I just wanted to, if I wanted to work in the living room, if I wanted to just not be in the studio, my studio is quite a small little room, I can work anywhere with that rig, but then if I want to play it back, if I want to do a different version, I can play it back through the modular, and I can also recall songs. So obviously with a track that is done entirely in the box, once I unpatch it, it's gone. It wasn't until I sort of said, look, I'm going to actually start writing and recording again, that I had to set them the challenge of, how am I going to do this? How am I going to set up a rig to produce techno? And at what point will it stop being the modular and start being the production environment? Do I do another rig full of effects, or do I just go, look, I'm just going to use the effects out of software? So this is just kind of another little angle on that. It's like, well, what else can I do? How else can I do this? It's a good, just a good little kind of technical challenge in the studio, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been fun just writing in software. It's not as much fun as working with the modular. I did very quickly hit a point where it's like, I'm missing the modular. Like, this is why I don't use a computer anymore.
But then there are also a lot of amazing processing systems on the computer. Like, we've also got amazing VSTs like Alto and stuff, which are very modular, and Reactor, and there's kind of the sky's the limit. When you start really thinking about how to use a computer for what it's best at, you could rapidly exceed the power of the modular.
Yeah, you could, but you also come back to that same rabbit hole. Yeah, I've worked with Reactor for a lot of years, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I want to make music. I want to spend my studio time making music and playing music. I don't want to spend it sitting in front of a computer doing stuff that is the musical equivalent of checking my emails.
Amen. Well, unless you have any other thoughts. Do you have any other thoughts you'd like to interject? This could be your last word.
Perhaps not. No. Buy more modules.
Buy Justin's modules. Abstract Data. What's your website? Abstractdata.biz.
You got it.
Abstractdata.biz. You have 3 new modules out. ADSR, a VCA, and an attenuator.
4-channel utility mixer, very highly spec'd envelope generator, and an awesome old school characterful VCA.
I'm going to be trying the VCA. Quite
good.
I'm going to put it in my live system and do some freeform techno jams.
And buy some music off me, because I don't make any money out of modules.
Okay, what is it? Jack Patch.
Jack Patch on Bandcamp.
Jack Patch. Go buy Jack Patch's music. It's good. It is good. And go and play it in the club. All right, Justin. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Cheers. And
theme music.
I actually need to write all right. So, that was me and Justin hanging out in the living room, drinking extremely complex coffee. I made that coffee from a book. Amused him greatly because it was a French press, but I actually did things like skimming the scum off the top of the French press and pouring it out and doing lots of other dweeby things. which amused him. But it tasted really good. I have to say, it was quite a nice cup of coffee. And anyway, as we said, please check out his new modules. He's got 3 new modules and his music as Jack Patch. But yeah, I really like that sort of his final takeaway there about the compartmentalization of the music making process. I think that's, even if you didn't do exactly what he does, there's a lot to be learned from doing that. I know other musicians who make quite a specific point of dividing music making into stages, be it sound design, then composition, or no, the other way around, composition of creating the melodies using basic sounds and then doing sound design afterwards. That Vince Clarke does that, Zoe Blade does that, and I think that's a brilliant way of doing things, is divide the processes up, so you don't get too distracted and you don't you're not going to lose something. I don't know, lose impetus, momentum, whatever it may be. But by separating these processes, you don't tie yourself in knots. Not so easily, perhaps. Not that I do that. I'm terrible. Hence, it's taken me something in the region of 16 years to release an album. More on that soon. And as a final note, obviously, please check out Justin's stuff. But actually, just a quick shout out. I appeared on a podcast, another podcast, which was by a man called Chris, but it is Chris goes under the name midierror, and I will link to that. Have a listen, and just as a big shout out to that podcast, because it actually inspired me in part to do this. So a shout out to Chris, and thank you for having me. We have a big chat, and there's another hour and a half of stuff to listen to if you want to go and listen to me banging on about stuff. All right, that's it. Thank you. Bye.